Greetings! Here we are, friends. It is time for yet another sketchbook tour! Whee! So I finished this sketchbook and I will take you through it and talk about what's in it and also how I enjoyed working in this specific sketchbook. So first things first, what is this sketchbook? This is the Perfect Sketchbook by Etchr. So that was the paper that was around it. The text specs, it's A5 format, so 21 by 15 centimeters, 8.9 by 5.9 inches, landscape format. It is made from artist grade 100% cotton watercolor paper, 300 GSM, cold press, archival grade, expandable inner pocket, PU cover, and 44 pages. So PU, I think it's polyurethane. It's basically fake leather. Also, if you want to know about these really adorable tiger stickers, they are from Omona. So I will have the link to their shop in the description. I really like their visuals. I started this sketchbook in 2023 on the 14th of July. As I like to do with new sketchbooks, I like to make a sort of intro page. And then the sketchbook. Alright, so the very first thing that graced this sketchbook is my swatches and demo painting featuring Sella Paint Co., which are absolutely lovely paints. I really, really love them. And yeah, and that's when I decided to sort of put in the like bits and whatever and packaging and papers and things that I wanted to keep with the paints, like have the whole experience together, the everything together. So the swatches on one side, all the little info, the wrappers or the things, and then my demo painting on the other side. So everything is together and I can more easily reference the paints and the colors and how I use them, and it's easier to remember my impression of them and all of that. So we are off to a good start in this one. Then I tried to keep going with the same logic. This time it's the Art Nouveau set from Caturdays in their Gansai Tambi range. So a beautiful assortment of slightly more muted colors, and I did some color wheels, and then again, same idea, demo painting on the other page. And we keep going. So this was for a paint set that was sent to me, the Golden Maple watercolor set. I did the swatches on one side, demo on the other side, and I really had something going, and I'm quite happy. Like, I thought that this was a good middle ground between having a really refined sketchbook, which in my opinion is not exactly the point of a sketchbook, but also not having the sketchbook be a completely useless mess that once you're finished with it, you're like, oh, now what? Like, this is gonna take up space on my shelves, and for the space it takes and the time I put in it and the price of the sketchbook, I don't feel like the value is there. So yeah, and I kept with the same idea. For this I wanted to paint with a specific set of muted colors that I set up, and this was a study of a photo that I did, but I decided to add the little cat in there, and then I decided to expand on the little cat on the other page. Have them be, well, have her be a sort of a little cat witch or something with a bunch of keys. And I also wanted to add some shiny paints. Then we have my first discontinued vintage color page test that also set a sort of precedent for this kind of test, because I have quite a few vintage paints, and this was the first time that I lay it out like that, and I really thought that this was a good way to have the spread again. So brand name, pigment, gradated swatch, the label, and a little monochromatic test to see the color in action in varying hues and all of that, and layers and whatever. And I inked this with acrylic ink. And I was like, oh, actually labeling what paints I use for what is also something that I want to do more frequently. But that includes, like, in this case, the ink. that I used for this particular painting. And I also have this swatch that I decided to keep with this because I use this to compare to other colors. So you could like have another swatch next to it and see exactly how different or not they were. And then I have this print that is not from me. It's something that I got with a purchase quite some time ago. And it was just the right size to have between these pages because I wanted to prevent some rubbing off from happening. There's a bit of color that picked up. I think it's mostly maybe the ink. From this page, I think this is the only page in this format in this book. Yeah, I had the palette to clean up, a Holbein palette like that I wanted to remove the paints from. So I did this little doodle. It's not the best, but it allowed me to use some of the paints and to have fun with, you know, effects and shinies and whatnot. And then I kept going. I think this is probably my least favorite spread in its original state. I don't think this drawing is quite successful. I think it's a bit whatever. And you get some sketch lines that are still visible through. And it made me realize that I really should make an effort to always tape off a border. It's a really minor thing, but it kind of makes everything look better in my opinion. And I feel like with a slightly different composition and a bit of a border, this would look a whole lot better. And this page was an experiment that utterly failed. I tried like painting hexagons and whatnot, but the method I was testing out to preserve some areas while painting others really didn't work out. So I stopped the experiment. This page was left like that for a while. And then I was like, okay, let's do something with it. So I sort of stripped the color as much as I could. I added more color on top, and then I drew something on top in black and white just to add a bit of an interest. So the failed painting is sort of just a texture, and the black ink that makes most of the drawing hides whatever other nasties are under there. So I was like, that's an interesting way to salvage a page. And then we have another test page and extras. So for this particular paint, these are the Hungry for Paint watercolor paints. So I wanted something more loose. So I had this, I did something more controlled. So I had this, and then I had all my swatches and, you know, notes and packaging and whatnot. So I cut it all down and put it in there, and it holds in place with washi tape. And yeah, I feel like that's a really cohesive way. Like I don't have to wonder what paint I use for these because it's all there. And then I can also reference my swatches at the same time, and all the info is grouped together in this spread. Then I decided I wanted to finally work with these Kuretake graphite colors. I followed the same idea, but I went a bit extra with it because I gave it 2 pages. So small swatches with color names, a demo here. Then I wanted to have some larger swatches with gradation on the other side, but there was this bit of space that I was like, what am I going to put there? So I did another drawing. Then I also did swatches on cold press. I was like, let's keep everything in there, and I taped the swatches with everything. Same idea, but different set. Literally same idea, like you can see. These were the Boku Undo Shadow Black May set. Beautiful set. And then this was a bit different. This is when I started trying out the Ferris wheel press inks. I knew I was gonna have to work in monochromatic because the first inks I was sent were actually these two, Hearty Harvest and Black Masquerade, which is I think one of my favorite inks ever. It's a black acrylic ink with a sort of silver shimmer in there, and it makes for really interesting line art. So that's when I decided to go a bit more graphic. And it was also at the time where I started doing a lot of quilting stuff. So you can find some little quilting patterns on the side. And still is this notion of my like inventory spreads drawing, but with a bit more of graphic elements to fill it up. Then some swatches. Again, instead of just having like blobby swatches, I took the time to like lay out the grid and tape off the edges. And I feel like this is more pleasant to look at, even if it's just as informative as, you know, blobby swatches. And we go back to a set of paints I was sent to review. So I did swatches on one side. I did swatches on black paper, so I included that. And then my demo painting. and another set. So this one is not one I was sent. This is one that I was able to get through Jackson because I had saved up enough of my affiliate coins over there to exchange for this palette. I just thought it was a really interesting palette, like a bit more cohesive. The only color I'm not a big fan of in there is the titanium opaque white. That I don't think is the most useful color, but overall it's just a fun palette, and it has some of my favorite schminke colors in there, like their Potter's Pink, and I quite like their Green Earth. Like you can see, like this one, this one, this one. Beautiful colors. So swatches. I did a color wheel for this one because I was curious to see what kind of primary mixes you can get, and then I also did a demo page. Another Ferris wheel press page. This is when I kind of decided to make it a sort of template for when they send me inks. And again, I wanted to keep everything together. So this piece of paper is my swatches on Tomoe River paper. And you flip it up and you have the demo painting underneath. You have the swatches on the side, so you can see just how they look. And then the painting on here. And I used the same idea of like a graphic frame and then a little vignette in the middle. Now, I think this is another one of those prints that I had that I put in there to protect. I think it's mostly to protect this page from the next page. Because on this one, I went really ham on the interference colors, and as a result there's a lot of shininess that rubs off on all over the place. So I kept the black paper swatch on there. I have my regular swatch, I have the demo painting all together. Then I have the spread I did on the Roman Schmal October color, which was the special color they released in October of 2023. I followed the same kind of idea that I had for the other monochromatic painting pages I did with the vintage colors. So a little demo, a big swatch, label, pigment info, like all the info. And then I had these like swatches that I did so that I could compare. So I decided to keep them with this, tape them in there, let's go. And then my page of mixes to see how close you can get from mixing the same pigments. Then we get another Ferris wheel press page. So same idea, little drawing, swatches. I had extra ink for this one, so I made kind of a blobby mess on the fancy paper, and also my two swatches on fancy paper. Then another protector, because the little shimmer can rub off just a tiny bit, so sometimes I like to keep things separate in this way. These are swatches of Roman Schmal colors that I added to my collection at that point. Then I have another demo page of Gansai paint, so I went back and I did the same kind of test and layout. And I have a cat. Say hi. No? Alright. So for both of these pages I used Agalo paints. I felt like it had been a while since I played with this palette and used like the whole range of the colors I have, so I wanted to do a little spread about these. And for this one I wanted to see just how far I could layer them to make for a night scene. This next page is something I painted with the same Schminke vintage set that I've shown earlier. So remember this? Well, there was a couple of spaces left in the palette, and I had a couple of Schminke pens just unused in my paint storage. So I added them to the set, and I thought I would do a little drawing featuring the new additions. I added a bit of a protective layer here because of the sparkle in these Ferris wheel press colors. So this drawing is a bit wonky on its own because I use a dip pen to ink it, and I'm really not familiar with dip pens, so it made for a slightly wonky drawing. But it let me test the colors of the ink just fine. Right, then I have a couple of things. So if we open this up, here I have my test page for the Della Magna Genuine Castle Earth paint. And I kept like the cute packaging and labels and whatnot with it. And then on the next page, I did something similar with a different paint from a different brand. This one is the Delft Blue from Stone Ground Paint Co. So I went the same route of the same size swatch and then having a space for a little monochromatic painting. The next one is this page where I wanted to try something that had been on my brain for a while, and it's to use just a teeny tiny bit of pastel, like dry pastel, with a painting in watercolor to create kind of a glow effect. So this was my test page for that. For this one, it's another one of those new color test page. At that point in time, I got 2 new Agallo paints, and I wanted to just play with these paints on their own. One is Vivianite Genuine and one is Dragon's Blood. And I was a bit unsure about how I would use these two together, but I think I figured it out. I think this made for a really fun test page. And it allows me to keep like all my labels, all my info, everything together. This is the spread where I did explore 2 different Prussian green. So on this side, I was trying to replicate the color to see just how close I could get to the hue of a color with the paints I had on hand rather than buying something new. And on this page, this is my test page for the vintage Prussian green from Winsor & Newton. So I went back and I did like I did the Schminke one. So this one, and I did something really similar for this. And then the very final page of this sketchbook. And I was looking for something to draw and I saw this here just climb, and I was like, okay, let's use that as a starting point, as a prompt for a little doodle. And this is Holbein watercolor paints. I should write that down. And that's it. That's my sketchbook. So I finished this, you can see, not too long ago. So end of January 2024. Started in July 2023. So about 6 months. So it took me about that amount of time to fill up these 44 pages. I also always add a bunch of stickers everywhere because I can. And overall, I really like this sketchbook. I think it's a really nice one. It's definitely one that I would consider getting again if I can afford it. Because that's often the issue. Like, the good sketchbooks are not cheap. But they are definitely worth it, but they're not cheap. So you really have to save up for a bit before you can get a new one. And yeah, I had no issue with the binding whatsoever. And you can see just how thick this ended up being with all the stuff I taped in and all the additions in there. And it still holds on fine, no issue whatsoever to this point anyway. Like, the signatures are good. I have had no breakage. Let's see if I can find a... So you can see a bit of strain, of course, but it's still holding on. And I like this. This is a good size. This is a good format. The paper takes masking tape well, and it takes ink relatively well. You can see in some spots where the pens I used for my like info and titles can sort of rub off on the other side, and also some of the paints at times. But yeah, so maybe like they don't intend people to use these as extensively as I have. I don't know. I don't really mind it. That's why I just roll with it. And I try to mitigate what I can with these pages to protect other pages. But yeah, overall, it's a really solid sketchbook. No complaints whatsoever. I would definitely recommend it if it's within your budget. And I'm really looking forward to see how it will archive now that it's finished and it's gonna go on a shelf. Have you tried the sketchbook? Is it one that you've bought but still haven't gotten into it? Is it one that you want to buy but can't really decide yet? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your thoughts and opinions. And thank you very much for watching this video. See ya in the next one. Bye bye.